In this world, magical powers were the most important thing, especially because martial arts had become obsolete, but to obtain a mage's powers, parents needed to offer sacrifices to the gods. If someone was blessed by a god, then they would gain strong magic. However, not everyone was as lucky as that. Our protagonist was one of those unlucky ones, and he would have to follow the path of the outcasts, which was to train in martial arts. However, he wasn't limited, and because of that, he ended up becoming stronger than everyone else even without magic. His physical strength made up for it. The story begins with our hero losing his grandfather before his eyes. His mother worked very hard, but she was loving and made sure nothing was missing. He also had a younger sister, and he felt he needed to protect her at all costs. However, our boy was bullied at school. Everyone called him a useless weakling. It seemed like he was used to being a nobody. They even said that just his appearance already irritated people, and as expected, he decided to take a onion with the truck. And for those who follow the channel, they know that the truck is the super hard boss to defeat. And so the boy ended up dying. I can't believe I'm going to die without being able to protect my little sister. The last thing he thought about was his sister and his mother. People were desperate, and we see magic starting to descend into his body. That mana butterfly ended up touching his face. If he had a next life, he swore he would protect the people he loved so much. And so we move to the magical continent called Arcanus. In that kingdom, there was an annual divine blessing ceremony taking place. Children under 6 years old could offer gifts to the gods, and if they were blessed by a spirit, they could obtain magical elements. A little boy asked his mother if he could offer his candy to a god. If it were that easy, that would be nice, huh boy? The gods of this world liked expensive jewels instead. And that's why the richest families continued the lineage of strong mages, while the poorer ones did not receive the grace of the gods. At that moment, the Ryan family arrived. They had spent a large part of the family fortune obtaining 2 treasures. Ronald Ryan, who was the head of the family, had made a huge bet on the future of his lineage. These were his 2 children, Lucas and Julia. I won't make much mystery for you. They'll go ahead and tell you that this one is our protagonist, the leader of the holy church called the Ryan family. The first to offer the sacred item was the protagonist's younger sister. She placed an ancient and extremely expensive crown, and so God began to direct his attention to the altar. At that moment, lightning struck the place. That was the blessing of thunder. Incredibly, she received a level 7 blessing right from the start. It was no wonder that the richest possessed the best blessings. The ground began to shine, and everyone clapped for little Julia, since she had obtained great power. It seemed it was worth spending half of the family fortune on that relic. Even Lucas clapped, congratulating his little sister after adjusting his son's tie. It was his turn, and the father kept encouraging Lucas to stay calm as the butler brought the sacred relic. When he took it out of the box, everyone was surprised. It was no wonder, because that was the sword of the god of fire, volcanoes. Since his little sister had done so well, everyone expected the same from him. The church leader was astonished that the Ryan family had managed to acquire such a rare artifact. That meant they were truly betting everything on that boy. After placing the item on the altar, a light began to shine. Even the sky of that kingdom changed color. It seemed that something wrong had happened. The flames of the church intensified, and it looked like the boy was surrounded by intense fire. The sword even began to levitate, and incredibly, the flames started to hit the boy's body. He couldn't believe it was real, and then he began to scream in pain. It was as if the gods were saying that this gift was an insult. They even began to consume the sword, and soon after, the sky returned to normal. The divine spirit hadn't appeared, and everyone was trying to understand what had happened. Julia knew that her brother wasn't well, and when the smoke cleared, he fell to the ground on his face. It was clear that the boy was completely lost. Immediately, the girl began to cry. Climbing the stairs, the father began calling Lucas' name. None of them had ever witnessed anything like what had just happened. Just by seeing our protagonist suffering like that, we can already imagine what will happen to him from now on. This boy only gets into trouble. Even the church leader was surprised that the gods had rejected him. Lucas Ryan was abandoned by the progenitor of magic. However, that mana butterfly also descended upon that boy, just like on our protagonist from the other world. Meanwhile, in the kingdom of fire, we see that it was complete chaos. Volcanoes asked how they dared to offer that gift to him. That sword had been responsible for causing him a painful wound in the past. The fire spirits appeared below the god. They should be grateful that I consumed the soul of that useless child. One of the spirits kept saying that the soul of another child from another world was entering Lucas' body. However, the god of fire, Volcanoes, said that he didn't care if another soul reincarnated in that body. And he still said that it wasn't their business. And that's how that boy from our world ended up in the body of Lucas Ryan. The soul of that boy was devoured by the god of fire, and a new soul was ignited. But meanwhile, in the celestial spring realm of the martial god, we see a meditating deity. When he noticed that a child without the blessing of magic had been reborn, he became alert, so he immediately stopped meditating and descended to the ground. The strength of that man was incredible, so much that he managed to break water. Don't ask me how he did that. Just by his glow we could tell he was powerful. The man's power was so sinister that he even broke the dimension. He went to the source that governed the world, and asked if that creature sought to block his path to the higher dimension. That galactic monster just gave a little laugh, and then released a dark power. It was a shadowy energy that filled the whole place. It seemed that this monster didn't like the martial god very much. However, the man approached, preparing an attack. After throwing a punch, he ended up destroying that creature, leaving nothing behind. Seriously guys, the power level of this story here is looking like Dragon Ball. He destroyed that galactic monster, and was now free to travel between dimensions. After taking a deep breath, he said that this source of power was nothing special. From afar, an elemental spirit came toward him. He was desperately calling for the martial god, and that red-haired man ended up holding the spirit, telling him to speak quickly. The little spirit said that something had happened in the kingdom of the god of fire, and that he had devoured the soul of a child on the continent of Arcanus. It seemed that this martial god had a rivalry with that god of fire, and since the Arcana continent valued magic greatly, those without mana were treated as trash. That's what the elemental spirit kept saying. However, the martial god said that he couldn't do anything about that. And the only thing the spirit wanted was for the god to descend and bless that child. If you bless him with the power of martial art, he won't be a complete useless one. And so, that little spirit kept trying to convince the god. After much insistence, he finally agreed to help the boy. At that moment, Lucas opened his eyes and saw some flashes of light. He was still weak and couldn't tell what it was. In front of him was the face of a red-haired man, and he even fainted again after seeing that strange thing. The man tried to wake the child, saying that he was Mark, the martial god, and that he was granting him a blessing. Meanwhile, he was there in the room, seeing those shining lights. Those elemental spirits were the representations of God. Thus, he truly woke up, surprised by what he was seeing. Then the blessing struck directly on his forehead. He had received the blessing of the martial god, and he no longer had a training limit. In other words, guys, his power level, the level he could reach, was infinite. Placing his hand on his head, he tried to understand what he had just seen. He had seen a supermuscular little dwarf with fairies. That was very strange, since a few seconds earlier, he had been facing the truck. He swore that he had been run over and lost his life. But at that moment, all the memories of that body came into his mind. He managed to remember everything he had gone through. It seemed like the gods were playing with him. Yeah, my boy, you were reborn in a body abandoned by the magic gods. And what remained was only martial combat. Now comment down below which one you prefer, magic or martial art. If you commented magic, watch until the end, because I'm sure this story will make you change your mind. He looked at his own hands and realized that he was indeed in another body. And since he had taken the memories of the previous owner, he understood what that blessing from the martial god meant. At that moment, he saw a lollipop falling to the ground and realized it was from his little sister. Julia seemed surprised that he had woken up, and the poor girl even started crying. We could see that she really loved her big brother. She had heard from Jeremy that Lucas would never wake up again, so he started patting her head, feeling a little embarrassed. Thinking about his family from the other world, he felt sad, because they must have cried a lot over his death. But now he was in another world, and promised to take care of his little sister with all his strength from now on. The adventure of our hero begins. The scene goes to a dark altar, and we see a statue of a woman with wings. Suddenly that statue begins to cry blood. And it wasn't a small amount, guys, it was a lot. Then a head starts emerging from that pool of blood on the ground, an unfriendly introduction from that villain, saying she felt a detestable presence. Seeing the figure of the martial god there in that puddle, she asked if he had died, or simply left this world. It seemed that she had a deep grudge against him, and now this was the perfect chance for her to be reborn or set free. Since the martial god was no longer in her way, she could conquer the world again. Thus years passed, and our boy was already in his teenage phase. He had spent all those years training intensely and had become more powerful. But he didn't tell anyone about it. A thorn began to move toward him. The boy heard a noise and was surprised, but the thorns were so fast that he couldn't dodge and ended up trapped. He knew this was the work of his half-brother, that was Jeremy, the most jealous brat he had ever seen. Lucas looked back, irritated with that brother of his. That was the fourth son of the Ryan family, and he was all arrogant, since he could use magic and Lucas couldn't. And that's why he was trying to humiliate our hero. Those thorns began to tighten strongly, and he said it was to teach him a lesson. However, Lucas ended up yawning, showing that it didn't hurt at all, and still said that Julia was finishing practicing magic, and that's why Jerry should be careful if you don't want to be fried by her lightning. You'd better let me go. Of course, the blonde boy got a bit scared, but he didn't believe it, and before he could think much, lightning struck his body. And with that, the boy ended up turning into charcoal. From afar, Julia appeared holding her staff. She had used electric magic to protect Lucas. There was no way she would let those idiots hurt her big brother, and we see that she had grown and become a very cute girl. All worried, she kept saying she would remove those thorny vines from him, and thus managed to free Lucas. He thanked his sister and patted her head, then turned to Jeremy, saying that now he must have learned the lesson. The guy got very angry, wondering why Julia always protected the boy, and afraid of being hit by another spell, he ran away with his maid. Turning to his sister, he said that last shock she gave was too weak. She held back. In response, the girl said she did that so she wouldn't kill her brother. He could defend himself alone, but he was hiding his powers from his family. The only one who knew he was strong was Julia. It had been 9 years since he had been reborn in Lucas' body, and that's why he had been training secretly all that time. The day he woke up, he imagined he would be expelled by his father, but something very different ended up happening. Ronald Ryan came running and hugged his son, crying with emotion. Although he led an order of knights and didn't have much time for his children, he loved all of them, and it felt very good to receive a father's hug, especially because our protagonist had lost his father. He only had his mother and a sister. When his father discovered that he had decided to train in martial arts, he ended up sending a letter with useful information in the letter. It said to Lucas that there was a file kept by the Ryan family, which he could read to learn techniques. And with that, the boy ended up going to a hidden library of his family. Thanks to that letter his father had sent, he managed to put his plan into action, and because of that, he was able to train in secret for many years. The maids of the house always wondered where Lucas had gone, and strangely, they felt tremors all over the house. They even imagined it was some family member using earth magic. However, it was our hero punching rocks. He was doing that to dig a kind of tunnel under his room. After long months, he made a large area to serve as a training space. In those hidden tunnels, he built a study area, a training area, and a space to store his items. And finally, he reserved a small place to put a bathtub and relax. In the present days, we see that his training area had evolved a lot. After a day of training, he ran and jumped into the bathtub. Bathing with medicinal herbs was a great training tactic to strengthen the body. It had been about 3 years since he started training based on a chaotic temperament technique. Thanks to his strength, he was immune to any level 5 magic attack. His defense was already very strong, and what he needed to train a bit more was his offensive attack. Holding a sword, he went to a training dummy. He drew the sword from its sheath, and in the blink of an eye he delivered multiple strikes. He had trained for a long time, and since he couldn't use magic, he had to refine his martial art. That's why he could fight with multiple weapons, and the guy was so skilled that he managed to destroy that training mannequin. Although martial arts were powerful, mages were infinitely superior. After today's training, he managed to reach level 4 of the Thunder Spear. His abilities had improved greatly over those 9 years, but there was something bothering him. According to the books, when a martial artist reaches a certain level, he encounters a limit. The only way to surpass that limit is by attaining enlightenment. However, our hero Lucas was a little different, and we know why. The boy took a deep breath and prepared another attack. He struck that punching bag with his fists, and we could see that he truly had no limits, guys. He ended up destroying everything. I don't know how his parents thought those earthquakes under the house were normal. That move he had just used was the explosive punch of the frenzied war, and he had just advanced to level 5. He even smiled, saying he was very lucky to have no limits in his martial arts. And the guy knew that this was thanks to the blessing of the martial god he had acquired when he came to this world. A clock started ringing, and he knew it was time for everyone to gather for dinner. And so he went upstairs after taking another bath. He put on his clothes and joined the family to have dinner. His father welcomed him and said it had been a long time since they had seen each other. Our boy smiled, saying that he had missed his father. And Jeremy already had that jealous look since his brother got more attention from their father. The entrance exam for the Magic Academy will take place in a week, said his father. And the boy thanked him, saying that he had been training hard together with Julia. No matter which world he ended up in, strength was always the most important thing of all. At that moment, someone extended a hand. It was Julia, saying that she also wanted to go to the Magic Academy, but she was only 11 years old and wasn't old enough to enroll. But the girl said she could join the elite class. That was because she had received an offer to enter the elite class of the Magic Academy. Of course, Ronald was pleased, as that was a rare opportunity. It seemed that the girl's genius reputation had caught the attention of the magic school. And again, Jeremy was dying of jealousy. The boy was angry, saying that his father paid much more attention to Julia and Lucas than to him. The boy's mother pinched him and told him to calm down. Touching Jeremy's face, she kept saying there was no reason for him to worry. That was Jessica Ryan, Ronald's second wife. She said Jeremy shouldn't be worried, since Lucas didn't possess magic. So there was no way he would be accepted into that academy. A week passed, and they departed for the Magic Academy. Lucas and Julia's mother was very anxious, telling them to take care of themselves, and she also handed them a lucky coin that Ronald had given them. That coin belonged to a dynasty that had unified the world 10,000 years ago. He had told his children that Mars was the first emperor and had even managed to bring peace to the world. That's why those coins brought luck, as they symbolized peace. When our hero said goodbye to his family, he remembered his family from the other world, and because of that he became emotional, saying that he would keep that coin with great care, and placing his hand on his chest, he said he would take very good care of Julia. A few hours later, their carriage stopped, saying it would be better to set up camp. Night had already fallen, and the butler said they would soon arrive in the city of Dachau. Of course, Julia was very excited, saying she couldn't wait to get to the capital. And to make Julia even more anxious, the butler said there would be a food festival in the city, where the famous gourmet dishes would be presented. Immediately, the little girl started drooling, saying that she was very hungry. But at that moment Lucas sensed something dangerous. Using his detection ability, he noticed that 2 kilometers away, there were 12 horses and 13 people approaching. He turned to the butler and asked if there were bandits in that area, and the butler said yes, but it was very rare for them to appear. His chaotic technique was very reliable, that's why he was sure the bandits were approaching. He would need to use his strength to protect Julia, but he didn't want people to discover that he was strong, so immediately he stood up and told the staff to form up. As they were about to be attacked, the people there didn't quite believe it, since the night was peaceful, but a mission given was a mission completed. And the butler drew his sword and told the knights to prepare, as the danger was indeed approaching. He didn't know where young Master Lucas had gotten this information, but it was better to be cautious. And within a few minutes the bandits really arrived. "Ah, my boy, are you going to doubt the protagonist?" The knights there were even surprised, saying that the young master was indeed right. The bandits knew there were rich people passing through that region, and their goal was to capture that little girl to sell her as a slave. However, the butler stepped forward, saying he would protect the children with his own life. The butler even told the bandits that they were nobles, but those guys didn't care about that, and a great battle was about to begin. The criminals raised their weapons to strike the boy. However, help ended up arriving. The knight managed to block that attack and even knocked the bandit down. And finally, the butler appeared, turning bandits into minced meat. "Señorita Julia, please hide, for I will take care of this myself." With the sword in his hands, he began to defeat all those criminals. Another soldier also stepped forward, saying that he would protect the young masters. However, something caught Lucas' attention. His soldiers had started burning. That was because the leader of the bandits possessed magic. Turning around, the butler shouted for them to run straight into the forest. And since his guard was down, he ended up being hit. Lucas managed to put his sister behind a bush. And within moments, the butler was surrounded. "You old bastard, you killed several of my friends." And meanwhile, he kept saying that he would protect the young master and young lady with his life. Lucas had enough strength to handle that situation. That butler had cared for him since he was a little boy, so it would be very sad to see him die. "Hey, Julia, hide here. It'll help our butler." She was anxious but trusted him, for she knew her brother was strong. Almost all their soldiers had already been defeated. The only one still standing and fighting was the old man himself. And that guy was tough as hell, guys. Coming from behind, one of the bandits said he would take the old man down. Something surprised Forden, which was the butler's name. That was because the bandit had been sliced in half. No one there understood what had just happened. And within moments, all the other criminals were struck as well. The attacks were so fast, they couldn't even see where they were coming from. It was our protagonist using martial techniques to throw stones, and he even said that this was easier than knocking birds out of the sky. The bandits were defeated, and only the one who used magic remained. He shouted that he would take everyone with him to hell, and cast a gigantic fireball upon facing that magic. The old man gave in, knowing it would be very difficult to survive, and even thanked the gods for having helped at the last moment. But of course, our hero wouldn't let that happen, and appeared to intervene, and with just one slap, he managed to dispel the fire magic. The old man couldn't believe what he was seeing. Young Master Lucas was not a useless one. Fallen on the ground, the mage kept saying that his fireball had been cancelled, and when he tried to grab his staff, our hero appeared beside him. "The game's over for you," and with just one punch, an intense explosion happened, turning the man into dust. Literally, guys, nothing was left. Could it be that young Master Lucas did this? Yeah, my boy, our hero was fired up, and he even made a little signal to his butler. The old man, of course, was deeply moved, since young Master Lucas was an excellent martial fighter. But at that moment, something caught their attention. That mage, who had been defeated, ended up transforming into a creature. It was a horrendous monster. It even looked like an undead. Upon seeing that skeleton, our hero thought it was some kind of necromancer's spell, and little by little it began to take shape. He placed himself in front of the butler, and that creature screamed, saying that the boy should die. At that moment, he already began to feel a chill down his spine, especially since the gigantic monster was coming toward him. When he was about to be hit, he simply disappeared using incredible speed. He was on top of the monster, preparing a powerful punch. And before the monster could defend itself, he struck it in the face. However, our hero realized something strange, because there was a light shining below, and from the body of that destroyed creature began to emerge magical chains. Those chains went toward the bodies of the other bandits. What the hell is this? It even looks like some kind of necromantic spell. That was exactly what was happening, and the monster began gathering the magic of those soldiers. Besides that, there was a necromantic magic seal that was controlling that creature. Little by little, the monster regained power and took on another form. Until then, it looked like some kind of dinosaur or whatever that was. Normal attacks wouldn't work, so our hero prepared another technique. The creature charged toward our hero, and he released a golden aura. Those were the tiger fists. With a serious look, he delivered a strike, and a surge of power devastated the entire area. The monster looked a bit dumb and kept laughing, until that necromantic seal was undone. It seemed that our hero was an expert at turning his enemies into barbecue, and afterward, he ended up falling to the ground, a bit tired. He only heard the sound of his sister calling his name. Then Julia came out from those bushes and ran to hug him, and she gave him a big hug, saying that her brother was amazing. The butler didn't understand anything, guys, since he thought young Master Lucas was a complete weakling. At that moment, he ended up hearing a noise coming from the back. It was the horse neighing, and who appeared next to the horse was a beautiful girl. She had been kidnapped by those bandits, and meanwhile, we saw who was behind that monstrous attack. It was precisely that sinister woman, guys, and she kept saying that 44 people had been eliminated. We don't really know what her plans are, but we can already tell that she is very powerful. She stood up, saying that she was almost able to recover her maximum mana. Meanwhile, the scene returned to the camp they had made. And the little girl was asking the name of that woman. Her name was Maya Rasta, and our hero said that he had already heard that name before. Julia approached the girl and said that she had really heard someone with that name too. Then Lucas recognized it, saying that the Ryan family and the Rasta family had some kind of alliance in the city of Baku. The blonde girl asked Maya what had happened for her to be kidnapped. And at that moment she began to cry. A few hours earlier, the bandits had appeared and attacked her carriage. All the soldiers who had been protecting her were killed, even her personal maid, who had taken care of her since she was little, ended up being killed, and all of that was so they could kidnap young Maya and sell her on the black market. And just by looking at that scoundrel's face, we could already tell what he wanted to do to her, right guys? What a miserable world to be born into. No way, crying. She kept saying that this group of bandits robbed women and children. And Julia told her to stay calm, that now she was safe. However, our hero had heard all of that and became very angry. The butler called for the young master and said that the two girls had already gone to rest at that moment. Lucas asked the butler what he thought about what Maya had said. The butler said that he already knew those bandits, but he didn't know that they were operating in that region. That was very bizarre because those bandits were capable of using high-level magic. Besides that, they were controlling the dead, and the butler also found that very macabre. It seemed like there was some kind of demon behind all of that. The old man said that he would report everything that had happened to the Ryan family and also to the Rasta family so they could bring more reinforcements. The goal was to take all of them safely to the capital city where the Magic University was located. The next morning, they arrived at the border region of the Carmina Empire. However, they had cancelled the plan to pass through the city of Baku and enjoy the food fair, and Julia was really sad, poor thing. Our hero explained that it was for their safety and also for Maya's safety. Frozen, then she acknowledged it, saying that it would indeed be better for both of them to stay safe, but little Julia was hungry and kept saying that she really wanted to try that food. So he gave his sister a little smile and said that on the way back they would buy it. That's the famous excuse all parents give their kids. On the way back, well, buy it. They looked out of the carriage and were amazed by the city. Julia even commented that she had never seen such a beautiful city, and it definitely wasn't the city where I live, because think of an ugly city. This city had European medieval architecture, and Julia even commented that the rooftops were beautiful. It was the largest city after the imperial capital, and Maya was all excited, saying that it was really very beautiful. Our hero thought that he never imagined he could have a happy life after what happened to him in his previous life, and he even said that the atmosphere of the city was incredible, and even resembled the city where he had lived in his other life. At that moment, a circus clown appeared and scared the girls, and a little sad, Julia said goodbye to the food, saying that next time she would try it. But not wanting to leave his little sister with an empty stomach, he ended up getting out of the carriage and buying some food. And so they ended up tasting the sweets. That guy did everything for his little sister. Moments later, they arrived. They brought Maya to a place where she would meet her family. The butler also said goodbye, and our hero said that from now on he would take care of his sister. And the girl said that she would protect her big brother, and waved goodbye, touching Julia's head. He said that he hoped she would protect him since she was an exceptional mage, and the butler had tears in his eyes since that was very touching. He didn't like farewells. Maya said that it was very interesting because he had a sister who was a mage and protected him. Little did that girl know that our protagonist had stolen power. Thus, they said goodbye to the butler. They were arriving at the Magic Academy, and the guy felt very happy for having been reborn in that body and having that little girl as his sister. And just by looking at Maya's face, we could already imagine that she liked our protagonist at that moment. Our protagonist remembered a conversation he had with his butler. He had said that when the boy was younger he had a kind of arranged engagement with that girl. However, after they discovered that Lucas had no talent for magic, the girl's family ended up canceling that engagement. Yeah guys, we can already ship those two together. They had finally arrived at the Magic Academy in the city of Daku. No jokes about that city's name, guys. In that place they taught fire magic as well as magic of all the other elements, and you would only be able to graduate after spending 6 years and also completing the final test, of course. There were also special exceptions. Nero kept saying that some exceptional students could complete graduation earlier. He noticed that his little sister was a bit sulky and asked what was wrong. She said that she wanted to take the admission exam together with Maya so she could study with her. But Maya had ended up taking the admission exam in the morning because her family was with her. However, if the girl passed the special school and Maya did too, then they could study together. Hearing those words, Julia became very happy because she would have a friend there with her in class. When they arrived at the place, people started commenting about that little blonde girl, saying that she seemed too young to take the exams, And it seemed that she was drawing everyone's attention, guys, because they kept talking about her. After reaching the front of the academy, someone ended up calling her attention. That was the vice president of the Magic Student Council. And her name was Mina. She asked that little girl how she had managed to sneak in, and if she had perhaps followed her big brother. She said that she came to take the exam along with her brother Lucas. At that moment she remembered that the Magic Academy had given a special invitation to a 12-year-old girl who was a prodigy, and she even smiled because she knew that this girl was very powerful. "Are you Julia from the Ryan family?" "Yes, that's me." "Yeah. How do you know my name?" "You'll find out right now, but please follow me because they'll show you." She was only paying attention to Julia because she was a mage, and the little girl asked her brother if he wasn't going to follow them too. A bit embarrassed, Mina apologized for having ignored him and asked if he was Lucas Ryan, who was enrolled in the martial arts department. Hearing those words, people already began speaking badly about him. That was because martial artists suffered prejudice in that world, reminding you that magic was the most important thing. That's why those who didn't have magical powers were mistreated. When she realized that people were mocking her big brother, Julia got very angry. She could easily have used her magic to defeat everyone. She knew her brother was much stronger than those idiots, and it was very hard to keep pretending that he wasn't the guy side, and told his little sister to calm down. Mina just watched people making fun of him and even sighed, saying that she shouldn't have said that out loud. At that moment, she called Lucas and told him to follow her because she would show him the registration area. He was happy because this girl was one of the few who didn't show prejudice, and so they went to a large hall. They needed to check in with one of the professors from the student council, and after receiving one of the emblems, she said that a number would be stored. The exam had 3 parts. The first, they would measure their potential using magical light. Then, they would perform a compatibility test using spirits of different attributes. And lastly, and not least important, they would measure their destructive power on a magic dummy. The big guy asked if they would also perform those tests for the martial arts department, and Mina said yes, it would be the same for everyone. It was a bit unfair because martial artists didn't possess magic, so they were weaker. However, he ended up cracking his fingers and said that he accepted the challenge. He would show the power of martial artists and put an end to that prejudice. They went to the potential measurement station, and from that moment, the tests would begin. An old man on the big screen kept announcing it. That old man approached and ended up noticing our protagonist. The boy began taking the test, leaving the old man completely shocked. That was because the boy had 0 potential. Guys, he didn't even have a trace of mana. That was strange because even other weak martial artists had at least a tiny bit of mana. At that moment, someone extended a hand, and a purple light began to shine. People were already in shock because the purple light symbolized high-level mana. The one standing there was Julia herself, who had level 7 potential. Lucas noticed that and looked back. Then he shouted in the middle of the crowd, saying that his little sister didn't need to hold back and could use her full strength. At that very moment, she began releasing a bit more mana, and the light that was purple started turning golden, until the orb was completely shining like gold. The light was so strong that people there were almost blinded. They couldn't believe that someone was emitting that color. The old man was astonished because that symbolized that her magic was level 10, which was the maximum level. They even said that such a person appeared only once every 10 years, and that it symbolized she had great talent. After finishing, she sighed and ran toward Lucas, telling her big brother that she had done well. She ran to him and hugged him, and people started whispering, saying that a talented girl was the sister of a useless guy. They said that out loud, and another boy there even tried to cover his friend's mouth. We know that our protagonist will make all of them eat their words. All angry, Julia said that she wouldn't forgive anyone who tried to humiliate her brother. She knew that he had worked very hard through all those years. He wasn't very good with magic, but he could perform a kind of cultivation to help his little sister unlock her magical powers. And thanks to Lucas' help, she managed to increase her potential even more. Everyone went silent since the two of them were quite peculiar. After participating in the first stage of the test, they ended up leaving through the front door. With that, they went to the compatibility room. There, the student had more chances to learn. During one of the tests, everyone there was astonished. That was because Julia had affinity with all the elements. She was a true prodigy, and everything she did was extremely well done. They were even surprised, saying that they had never seen anyone receive a level 6 blessing from the god of wind and still have similarity with all the other elements. The boy just smiled, because he knew that his sister was really strong. All that thanks to the training boost he had given her through the years. Her score in the second stage of the exam was the maximum grade. She ended up receiving some negative energy from the envious ones, and even asked her big brother why those guys were staring with those creepy looks. Guys, she's only 12 years old and was scared by that. However, Lucas said that she shouldn't worry about it because that was normal. Some envious people always appeared, but of course she found that very scary and kept asking him not to let those people make those faces. Touching Julia's head, he said that from now on she would receive many similar looks and would need to get used to it. And he kept saying that she shouldn't worry about it because she was very powerful and they were just jealous, a bit more motivated. She said that he was right and that she would become stronger to protect him. She kept saying that she would protect our hero because she knew that he didn't want to show his true power to other people. Then we saw some students commenting about something. They were saying that they never imagined that such a talented girl could be the sister of such a useless guy. That was because not long ago he had just taken a compatibility test. He had 0 compatibility. That's right, guys. No elemental spirit wanted to get near him. One of the boys said that the spirits even backed away. And the strangest part of all was that the fire elemental spirit ended up losing its arm during the test process. They didn't know why that magic spirit ended up getting hurt. When Lucas was inside the room and the boy just listened to them talking about him chuckling, he felt relieved that there had been no witnesses. Then the scene went back a few minutes earlier when he entered the room to take the test. He noticed that all the spirits started moving away. However, the fire spirit, which was exactly the element he had been cursed with, kept trying to mock him. It even tried to launch a sort of attack at our hero. He was about to be hit by that small flame. However, he grabbed a small stone and threw it back at that elemental spirit, and it was precisely that attack that made it lose its arm. That was a kind of revenge for having placed that curse on him. And after that test was over, he took his sister's hand and said that it was best if they went to the final exam. He even asked if she thought she could get first place, and the girl said yes, and that he could too if he gave his best. I'm not going to give my best. You know, I'm trying to look weak, right? Minutes later, they arrived at the destruction test site. A metal dummy with a magical aura was placed there. And everyone started saying that it would be impossible to destroy such a dummy. Some annoying guys were saying they were irritated with that 12-year-old girl who was doing so well in the tests. They were talking about Julia and didn't know she was right behind them. Those dummies were made of metal and had a cursed class aura that was extremely hard to destroy. There were several of those dummies, and they would have to unleash their powers to cause as much damage as possible. Our protagonist's martial arts skill was level 6, so he had a great chance. He even thought that it had been worth buying those expensive pieces of equipment to train. At that moment, someone shouted for her not to push, and we saw a blue-haired girl, all angry, telling another woman to get in line. She was mad at that beautiful girl, and said that she was being too full of herself for cutting the line. Then that girl gave a sinister look, making the short-haired girl tremble in fear. I don't know, but that one looks like a character straight out of Gimpact. She then looked at our hero and his little sister, and Julia was mesmerized by that girl, since she had caught her attention. Are you Julia? The one who got 9/6 on the compatibility test. She gave the little girl a terrifying look, making her scared. She was so frightened that she hid behind her brother, standing in front of her to protect Julia. He asked, "Who is this woman? Do you think you have the right to go around scaring others?" She introduced herself as Anna Miranda, granddaughter of Duke Miranda. Big deal, my dear. That Miranda family belonged to the Northern Empire, which was one of the 3 families. Her clan had already produced the legendary mage Lucas' mother, Katrine, was from that Miranda family. In other words, that girl Diana was the younger cousin of our protagonist. He asked how old she was. The girl got all angry, saying that she was 15 years old. Then, girl, we're cousins. Why are you so mad at us? What cousin? What rudeness is this? I don't know. You feeling humiliated? She tried to use her spell on our hero. She stared at him with her Shingon and Suruav and tried to cast the hypnosis spell. However, nothing happened to them guys, and they even imagined her as if she were a shy little kitten laughing. He said that using mental magic on a relative you just met was bad manners. What? What do you mean? My spell didn't work on them and it was my best magic. At that moment, someone told Lucas Ryan to please get ready. She pointed her finger at Julia, calling her out and saying that the little girl shouldn't act so full of herself because she would be the one to take first place in the test. All right, girl, calm down and go to your job. The boy looked up and saw a panel showing the names of the top-ranked participants. Julia was in first place, followed by Anna. He knew that if his little sister did well in the next test, she would stay in first place. He even offered her a candy, holding out his hand and showing her a yellow little ball since she was such a sweet tooth. She immediately accepted it. However, that was actually a magic pill, and it ended up putting her in a kind of trance. Then she said that her brother was a big liar and had given her medicine instead of candy. He apologized and said that it was a special magic potion made with rare ingredients. She didn't really know what that medicine was for. She just kept saying that she wouldn't trust him anymore. The guy had a plan to put his little sister in first place. But now it was his turn to take the test since he didn't have magical power. The instructor told him to try to strike the dummy because our hero couldn't use magic. He already imagined that the attack would be pretty weak. However, the boy told the instructor to step back. That was because the attack could be too powerful. The people watching all of that started laughing, saying that this guy seemed overconfident. Of course, Julia got really mad and gave them a nasty look, which scared them. She knew very well that her brother was stronger than everyone there. That's why she got so angry. Anna asked if Lucas really was incapable of using magic. The little girl said yes, but that he was amazing even without mana. But Miranda didn't really believe that, since martial artists had rather limited power. While she thought about it, our protagonist struck and destroyed a large part of the arena. The guy was incredible, and no one there understood what had happened. In the recordings they saw that it was indeed Lucas who had struck the dummy. The scene went back 2 minutes earlier, when our hero had asked if he could make just one attack. The instructor said that it didn't matter whether he made 1 or 10 attacks because they would all be weak. Alright then I'll use my power. So the abilities of martial artists grew exponentially every 3 levels. Now that he had reached level 6, his power should be much greater than before. He adjusted his stance and then charged forward to throw the punch. His speed was so impressive that people couldn't even see it clearly. He had aimed at the dummy's weak spot, and when he hit it, he sent the dummy flying. The attack was so powerful that it truly destroyed a large part of the arena. Guys in the circle that had been red started turning golden, and an imprint of his punch was left on the dummy's chest. A large cloud of dust filled the area, and Anna asked how he managed to move so fast even without magic. The people behind her said that this boy actually seemed a bit strong, and she said that they hadn't realized Lucas' true power. He was far stronger than he had shown because he destroyed the dummy and made the mark turn yellow. That meant he had achieved the maximum score. He gave a little signal to his sister, and she smiled brightly and signaled back to him. As the other participants performed their tests, it was clear that Lucas was far stronger than them. The others could barely make a mark on that metal dummy. But then it was little Julia's turn with her thunder magic. She struck her staff on the ground and a magic circle opened before everyone. That was the incandescent lightning. A crimson lightning bolt struck the dummy, and the dummy was almost completely destroyed. The people there, who already thought she was strong, were even more surprised. And the girl even thought that she would only be able to do that when she was much older. After using that power, she fell to the ground, and they wondered if she was exhausted. In fact, she fell because she was surprised. Not even she imagined that her power would be so destructive. She had scored 95 points. Then she went to her brother and asked why the lightning that struck this time was crimson. The last lightning bolts she had released were all purple, and she didn't know why she had become so much stronger. Suddenly, he pretended not to know the reason, guys, but deep down it was because he had given that pill to the girl, which ended up boosting her power in this world. There were mages and also martial artists, and both could craft potions. However, the way martial artists refined potions was different because they made elixirs. Potions needed to be refined with mana, while elixirs needed to be refined through cultivation, and he managed to do that by becoming a specialist. In the past, elixirs were created in many different ways, but now they had become extremely rare. Since martial artists had become obsolete, that's why he had to research a lot to be able to create those elixirs to enhance Julia's power. With that, he ended up refining that small golden orb that amplified her abilities. The only person he knew who was capable of making elixirs from magical essences was a level 9 martial artist who belonged to the Imperial Ministry. He had made that pill for the girl, but of course he wasn't going to tell her that. The scene changed to a little later. She was anxious, asking if the exams weren't over yet, and he kept saying they just needed to wait for the list. At that moment, someone called out for Julia and Lucas. It was Mina, that student from the student council. They asked what she was doing there, and she said she came to show the class list, and that both of them had ranked first in the elite teams. The girl was overjoyed because she had managed to take first place in the elite class. They even showed their scores on the big screen. However, now Mina said that she needed to choose a department. There were 5 special departments: fire, earth, wind, water, and also the magical quality department. She should choose based on her attributes, and the girl began to think she ended up choosing the wind department, and Mina was very happy. Congratulating her, she would show the little girl where the dorms were, and Julia said goodbye to her brother, jokingly telling Mina to take good care of her. Everyone there looked for their names on the list and were surprised because Julia had taken first place, and she was only 12 years old. People were upset because she was so young and still ahead of them, but the one who was most annoyed by all that was Anna Miranda because she didn't come in first. Our hero stopped. He was a bit bothered because the martial arts department was rather shabby, and when I say shabby I'm being nice because the place was a dump. When he went inside, it was all dirty and moldy. A cheerful boy appeared, asking if our protagonist was Lucas Ryan. He introduced himself as Ko from the Tarwa family, and then they started walking through the martial arts department and noticed it really was a dump. Then the boy asked how our hero had made the dummy go flying, and Lucas said it was just luck. At that moment, one of the staff members told him to take his key, he would sleep in room 205. That was exactly the same room as the other boy, Ko. And as they walked down the hallway, they even felt scared, saying there might be ghosts. When they opened the door, they realized there were already people inside and were surprised by it. However, it was just two other boys who would be their roommates, and Ko was already a bit alarmed because there were too many people in one room. To make matters worse, their room was completely wrecked. He couldn't believe the martial arts team was treated with such neglect. There was even a spider in that room. That boy was obsessed with cleanliness, and showing a very valuable coin, he said he would pay them. He would give 1 gold coin to each of them if they cleaned his room. And full of motivation, the two boys started cleaning, and our hero said that they really were mistreated. He patted his friend on the shoulder and said they needed to change how martial artists were seen at that academy. And he agreed, saying that he hated spiders, and that they needed to fix that immediately. The spider tried to go toward him, and he hid behind Lucas, and so they started cleaning the whole dorm. After a few hours, it was sparkling clean, and as a reward he made the payment. Everyone there was happy to have received a gold coin. And of course, Lucas thought it was great because he had a roommate who was extremely rich. The staff came to bring them their uniforms, and when he picked up his, he realized it was more worn out than ever. He even got angry, saying that his uniform was completely torn. The ceremony would be held to explain things to the newcomers, and it would be a great chance to make a good impression, but with that uniform it wouldn't work. Ko kept saying that he refused to wear that uniform, but there was no choice, guys, they had no other option. So they all went to the Great Magic Hall. It wasn't just the uniform that was falling apart, but the boots too, and they arrived there with their clothes literally in tatters. What caught Lucas' attention was that the environment was extremely luxurious. They were amazed because the place was truly beautiful, and it seemed like it was trying to humiliate them by making them wear those ugly uniforms. As soon as he arrived at the place, Lucas started looking for his little sister, and she was all cute, wearing an extremely elegant outfit, since she was part of the elite class. Ko kept saying that the elite class uniform must cost at least 1,000 times more, but our boys said they shouldn't worry about that and should just look for their seats. As they walked through the place, everyone kept saying that the martial arts team would face heavy discrimination. He ended up sitting down and saw that there was a very cute girl wearing the martial arts department uniform. At that moment, a great flame appeared in front of everyone. That was the Flame Professor. He was a level 6 fire mage and welcomed the freshmen. He was the president of the student council and also a future great mage. His name was Teodoro. And the girls were all smitten. However, something caught Lucas' attention. After a short speech, Teodoro said that at the Magic Academy, everything revolved around a point system. Any learning resource they could obtain was based on the points they earned. Among them were magical beasts, rare materials, books, and even abilities. There were many ways to earn points, such as studying, working, hunting beasts, and of course making elixirs. And as expected, mages earned far more points, while martial artists started with a minimal amount. He also explained that orientation week for freshmen would give them points, and Lucas realized that was why Mina had been there helping them. Furthermore, everyone who became a member of the student council would receive a steady monthly income of points. In other words, the vice president earned 200 extra points, while the other members earned 100. He also said that hunting monsters would give plenty of points. Around the Magic Academy, there were monsters that threatened the students' lives. That's why hunting those beasts gave a lot of points, and our hero became a little more excited. That was because he was strong, and it would serve as training ground for him. A few hours passed, and it was already nighttime. The other students were sleeping, and our hero escaped through the window. He jumped down and took advantage of his colleagues being asleep to go on a hunt. And the best part of all was that the martial arts department building was located at the back of the campus. With that, he could easily jump over the wall to go hunting or training. He prepared to leap and managed to jump over the wall. That guy was amazing. Guys, just look at the height he could jump. As soon as he reached the forest, several monsters started chasing him. But our protagonist was a beast himself and managed to dodge that giant frog. He noticed that the creature had a horn that was very valuable. So he reached out to tear it off, and with little effort he defeated the creature, slamming it into the ground. And besides that, he managed to tear off the horn to use it later or trade it for points. That was the famous blackhorn giant frog. Besides being tradable for points, it could also be used to make various magic potions. He had heard that the Magic Academy had many legendary martial arts books in its library, so he could exchange his points and get those books there. At that moment, he used his magical eye power. That cultivation power allowed him to identify threats. He noticed there were many monsters and even giant rats. Those creatures were strong and would be good for him to use in training. Little by little, he defeated them and gathered the precious items from their bodies. He even defeated a level 3 magic-crested panther. He was making quite a mess in the forest, and within minutes he had collected several monster parts, enough to fill a huge bag. However, he sensed the presence of a magical beast. That meant there was a dominant monster in that region. Focusing, he used his cultivation technique to try to locate it. His perception spread through the forest until he found the creature's den. There, he sensed a malevolent aura. It was a giant wolf. He smiled, saying that he had found it. Throwing the monster bag over his back, he jumped from branch to branch until he reached the creature's den. Without much delay, the wolf came out from inside. That was a level 6 ice and fire wolf. Instead of being afraid, our hero smiled, saying that these wolves were very territorial. He entered the creature's den and made a little joke, calling the wolf to dance. If it were me, I would have run away from there already. But instead, our hero charged forward. The wolf dug its claws into the ground and prepared an ice blast. Our protagonist's fists were frozen, and the wolf chuckled, thinking it had defeated the human. However, even with his arm frozen, our hero threw a punch that sent it flying. The wolf realized that this human was no ordinary person, and the attack was so strong that it knocked the wolf to the ground. If I had trained a little harder, I would have defeated that monster with just that punch, said Lucas. The ice on his hands began to shatter, and he ended up calling the wolf for a second round. As expected, that wolf wouldn't be defeated so easily. And after using its ice magic, now it would use its fire magic. It released a flaming beam. That fire magic seemed to be very powerful, but honestly, I've never seen anyone be defeated by fire magic. Guys, I think fire spells are the weakest ones that exist. Seriously, try to remember any character who was defeated by a fire spell. There isn't one. If you remember someone, leave it in the comments. The wolf was all fired up in the middle of the flames. It even started howling, thinking it had already managed to defeat that human. However, our protagonist hadn't suffered any damage at all. The little wolf was frightened because it saw that the human was behind it. And our protagonist was already preparing a punch. The strike was precise, landing right in the middle of its chest. The creature spat out blood because that blow was truly powerful. And that one seemed to hurt. Guys, since the wolf was thrown far away, the attack was so strong that it bounced around that cave like a ping-pong ball, and then crashed onto the ground. While our protagonist said that this wolf was very resilient, it seemed that now it had started to feel a bit of fear. And when it looked into our protagonist's eyes, the beast began trembling in terror. That was because the boy was standing before it, asking if by any chance it was a rare beast. In that world, it was possible to tame those creatures. From the wolf's mouth came both icy mist and fiery smoke. It wouldn't give up that easily. Then it prepared a double strike. But the fire and ice ended up canceling each other out, releasing only vapor, and that was exactly the wolf's strategy to escape. Guys, that wolf must have thought, I'm getting out of here. I'm not fighting this guy, I'll run away to survive. But what it didn't expect was that the boy would be much faster. Yeah, my friend, looks like you're screwed, there's no way out. He prepared to grab the wolf and pulling its tail. Threw it far away. The poor wolf landed on its back, hitting the ground hard. While the wolf was trembling in fear, Lucas said that fighting magical creatures was a lot of fun. But he had let his guard down and ended up taking a tail slap to the face, even crashing hard into the wall. But we know our protagonist was tough and that didn't cause him any damage. Seeing that it was the perfect chance to counterattack, the wolf hurled its fire flames. However, Lucas dodged that attack, appearing right in front of the creature furious. The wolf began shooting several fireballs, but none of them hit our protagonist, who ended up throwing a very powerful punch. He was surprised because the wolf was quite durable, but with that punch, I highly doubt it survived. The hero wasn't satisfied, and didn't just hit once, he hit several times. Oh my God, what did I do to deserve this? The only thing the wolf wanted was to protect its territory. So in the end, the wolf gave up. It released from its mouth 2 spheres of energy. Those were the wolf's essences. Flame and ice. In that world, magical beasts were born with cores inside their bodies. They were very rare materials, and it was releasing them to form a kind of contract with the boy. When you couldn't defeat someone, you just had to join them, and our protagonist ended up accepting. That was unexpected, but he ended up kind of liking it from that moment on. That wolf would be his magical creature. He made a cut on his finger, letting out some blood, and with that, he made the contract with that wolf, and returned those energy core orbs into its mouth. From that point forward, they would share a bond, and the wolf began to speak, calling Lucas master. The boy was surprised and started looking around, asking if there was anyone else inside the cave. It's me, master, and I'm the one speaking to you, sir. Lucas was astonished, and decided to name him Labinho. Now our hero would be the owner of that part of the territory. As the wolf had previously been the leader of that area, the wolf came up with an idea, and approached our hero, saying it wanted to give him some treasure rewards, and even invited Lucas to follow it. So our protagonist began following the wolf through the caves. It had gathered some treasures and wanted to give them to its master. But there was a smell in that cave that bothered the boy. It was the smell of some hunts the wolf had done. And he was already delighted because those bones would be worth a lot of points at the academy, but that wasn't the only thing the wolf wanted to give as a gift. It even told the young man that there were more valuable things hidden inside. Lucas asked if by any chance they were attribute cores from other beasts, but the wolf said no, because it had already devoured those from other creatures. They devoured those magical beast cores to become stronger, and since our protagonist had defeated other creatures, he ended up giving those cores to Labinho. And so all of Labinho's wounds healed. They would then make a deal. Our protagonist would leave the treasures there, and the wolf would guard them for him in exchange. He would bring many cores to Labinho, and the wolf became overjoyed. But our protagonist didn't care much about the gifts the wolf wanted to give him. Just taking those monster carcasses and trading them for points was already good enough. The next day, the scene goes to the classroom. They were excited for their first day of class, but our hero was a little tired because he had spent the whole night training. He was even curious to see the gifts that Labinho had prepared for him, but it didn't work out because the wolf kept licking his face. Time had passed, but the teacher hadn't arrived yet. They even started getting impatient. One of the students asked where the teacher was because he was taking too long. Cool said that the martial arts professor was known for always being late. And speaking of the man himself, he ended up showing up and immediately dropped a wine bottle on the floor, and we can already imagine why he's always late. The guy burst through the door saying that he was late because he had been drinking, and our hero didn't really care much about it. He said his name was Silvio, and that he was in charge of the martial arts department. He said the class would begin, and our guy didn't really pay much attention to that. Minutes later, he started writing on the board. We could see that the man was barely holding himself together, and that ended up irritating Colo. He even whispered to Lucas, asking if that guy was really a teacher. And upon hearing those words, Professor Silvio got angry and threw a piece of chalk at his forehead, saying he wouldn't tolerate chit-chat in the middle of his class. After seeing that skill from the teacher, our protagonist began to respect him more. He was probably a level 5 or level 6 martial artist. He called for Tristana, and she answered. Then he called Lucas' name. He remembered that girl from the welcoming hall, and even commented that she must be pretty powerful. After finishing the roll call, the teacher closed his notebook. He had forgotten the textbooks, and pointing his finger at Tristana, he told her to go to his office and bring the books. She asked if it was really her, and the teacher said yes, because from now on she would be the class representative. He hadn't even held a selection. He just went ahead and chose her. And of course, Ko started complaining, saying that the class representative should be chosen fairly. He wanted to use his family background and his abilities to become the class representative. And once again he got hit in the face with another piece of chalk. The teacher said he wasn't allowed to speak without permission, and if he interrupted again he would be expelled from the room. After Tristana brought the books, she was supposed to turn to the first page and have everyone copy it, and of course she got really excited because being class representative was a big deal. Meanwhile, Ko already had a bump on his head, complaining that the teacher was too abusive. The way that teacher walked made it clear he had suffered a serious leg injury, and they even wondered what kind of strength he had before getting hurt after that. Lucas told his not to complain too much and to just accept the teacher's lesson. A few hours passed and they went to the cafeteria area. On the way, Ko kept complaining about that teacher, saying he didn't even teach properly, but while he complained, our hero went over to his little sister. Leaving the guy talking to himself, he patted Julia on the head and asked how her first day of class was. She said it was really fun and that the teacher was beautiful and kind, and even said she should be the class leader. Then she asked if her brother had already chosen a department within the martial arts division. He said no and that he hadn't even gone there yet. Then they went to the cafeteria to buy food. Since everything in that academy was handled through magic points, they also had to trade their points for food, and of course mages got the best meals because they had more points. Julia was still in the elite class, which earned twice as many points as the other mages. Meanwhile, Ko was all sad because martial artists didn't earn anything and even started crying, saying he'd have to settle for those old dry loaves of bread. The woman said that the meal fee for the martial arts department was 10 points, in other words much more expensive than for the mages. If they couldn't pay for the food, they'd stay hungry. And poor Ko sat there trying to be content with that old bread. However, the little girl told Ko that she had bought some food for him too. With tears in his eyes, he said that Julia was a very sweet and kind girl. At that moment, Maya ended up arriving. She was all smiles, saying it was a pleasure to see Lucas and Julia again. She had baked cookies to thank them for saving her life, and since Julia was a little sweet tooth, she was thrilled with those treats. Lucas also tried a cookie, saying that it was delicious, making the girl blush. She was very cute and seemed to be doing everything she could to please our hero. Ko asked if he could have one too, and they let him take a piece after tasting it. Everyone said that Maya's sweets were delicious, and then she said goodbye. Lucas was thinking that the cafeteria was a bad place to meet people. That was because everyone kept coming up to distract him. Then he started thinking about that girl who was always around Julia, and even wondered why she was so interested in his little sister. She had also approached him and showed a kind of interest. Soon after, Teodoro also passed by the cafeteria, making all the girls fall in love. He seemed to be very popular and kept using his fire magic to fly all over the academy, and our boy even commented that he was a show-off guys. Nostroi had also noticed that he used magic potions to enhance his powers because, without them, he couldn't fly. In other words, many mages used potions only to boost their abilities, and of course they didn't tell anyone about it. Someone passed by our hero and dropped a bottle. He turned around and saw that it was his teacher, Silvio. That guy was a true drunkard. He didn't stop drinking for even a second. Guy staggering, he went into a room, and when he arrived, all the mages started complaining, saying that, as always, he was Those mages scolded Silvio, saying he should take his duties seriously and act accordingly. But he just sat down in his chair and stretched, not paying much attention to them. The blonde teacher found that a bit strange and even made a face. Someone started tapping their fingers on the table and said it was time to start the meeting. The old man said that today's agenda was the Damar Cast tournament. In that Carmina Empire they were often attacked by hordes of monsters. That's why they had this tradition of always hunting those creatures. The blonde teacher said they had already prepared 2000 level 1 magical beasts for that event. That disgusting professor said that martial artists didn't even need to participate in the event because they were too weak. Someone slammed their hand on the table so hard that it startled him. It was Professor Silvio, saying he opposed that ridiculous idea. That arrogant professor said that Silvio's students didn't deserve to participate in the event because they were trash, and that blonde teacher defended Silvio, saying that all students should take part in the hunting event. The other teachers agreed, saying that even martial artists who were considered useless should have the right to participate in the event. That arrogant man got angry because the other teachers, who were mages, were taking the martial artists' side. She even looked at Professor Silvio and asked if they didn't recognize his power. That jerk said that if everyone wanted martial artists to participate, then he would accept it, as if the guy had any power to stop it, right guys? It was decided. The old man said that all departments, including martial artists, would take part in the event. He ended up leaving that room sulking. They went to the blonde teacher and asked if she was sure about what she had said. That was because that professor named Greg had made a good point, saying that martial artists were too weak and would only ruin the event. However, she just smiled. That was Julia's teacher. Guy, she had been saying that for a long time cowards were those who didn't have the courage to overcome difficulties. That tournament to tame magical beasts would take place in 6 days. The professor went to the classroom and explained to them how the event would work. They would have to tame magical beasts, but Ko was sulking because he hadn't been chosen as the class representative. And again, the professor threw chalk at his head. Our hero thought about it because it was quite difficult for mere martial artists to tame magical beasts. However, doing practical combat training could help them, so they went outside and started training. A girl was thrown hard against a tree. And the one who did that was none other than Tristana. That girl was a beast, guys. You'll see everyone who had passed the entrance exam was incredibly strong. And the tree that the girl hit with her back even broke and fell to the ground. Our protagonist, of course, was much stronger than the others and ended up throwing his opponent far away. The teacher just told them to keep training and went off to drink his wine. Moments later, Ko was thanking God because the training was finally over. His friends said they were heading to the cafeteria since today they needed to eat earlier. They were eating early because Ko had offered them a coin in exchange for the value of their points. Our hero listened to that whole conversation and realized that Ko was basically using his money to trade for points with his friends. He went up to our hero and said that he was very smart for earning points that way. Although that guy was a spoiled rich kid, our hero said he wasn't that annoying after all. He patted our hero's shoulder and said he could teach him a method to earn a lot of magic points at the academy, but our hero gave a little smile and said that he didn't need his help. That ended up making Ko embarrassed. Later, our hero went back to that forest. He was several monsters and collecting their legendary items. However, his face got all dirty and he wiped it clean. Then he went to the wolf's cave, and upon arriving there, he took the meat from the monsters he had defeated and started a barbecue. He used all his nighttime hours to train and grow stronger. He was still thinking about how the vice president Mina was getting close to Julia. He couldn't let his guard down since those mages were very cunning and often acted with bad intentions. Labinho ended up appearing, drooling and asking his master if he could eat. The big guy said yes, that it was exactly for him, and ended up feeding his magical beast. Alright Labinho, after you eat you're going to help me train, I promise I won't hurt you. And as expected, the wolf didn't like that idea at all. Meanwhile, the scene goes to the Ryan family estate. Katrine, the mother of our protagonist, was very worried. Someone arrived and asked if she was thinking about the kids again. It was her husband, and she said yes, that she was very concerned. Ronald said that classes had started that week and they should be learning a lot. But she was missing Lucas and Julia very much. He explained that he would pass through the city of Daku in a few days and could take her there, and with that she was already a little happier because she could see her children. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Count Grindos' mansion. There was some kind of strange meeting happening. All of them were wearing cloaks and masks. A woman said to Jessica that she was happy she had come, and we see that it was exactly that demon woman who was trying to recover her body. Jessica was that same blonde woman who had appeared earlier. She spoke about her new creation called Jad's Dream and said that the moment they drank it, their bodies would start to glow. The woman took a goblet containing that liquid, and the strange woman made a cut on her wrist, causing her blood to splash into all the goblets. They drank that disgusting liquid, and all of them seemed quite eager to consume it. Then the strange woman threw that black hood onto the floor, and we could see that she had the necromancer's mark on her back. Everyone there was watching closely, and Jessica was paying close attention. Someone said that an 11-year-old girl had destroyed that he, referring to that thief who had turned into a monster, and they also said that Julia had received a level 7 blessing. However, mere level 7 mages would not be capable of defeating them. But the blonde woman was worried that their efforts might not be enough to bear fruit. Then the green-haired woman asked if by chance the blonde didn't want to kill Katrine and her children. She said yes, that she wanted revenge and to kill them. Smiling, the woman said she would have to do something. Then she touched the girl's body, causing that necromantic seal to appear. And she was transferring her power to that girl. The next day, Tristana said they would have a practical combat training session that morning. Some students who were sore from the previous training started complaining. Yeah guys, I know it hurts, but we need to get stronger. Some students said they weren't feeling any pain, and probably had more resistant bodies. Kai even said he wasn't feeling any pain at all. That was a bit strange, but they didn't really know why. We can already imagine that our protagonist was using his pills. The girl assumed that some students really had great endurance, which is why they looked fine, all fired up. Kai said he would join the sparring. He went straight at our hero, but as expected, didn't stand a chance. After blocking, our hero prepared a counterattack. And the strike was so strong that it sent KO flying. Then Lucas prepared a level 5 strike. The attacks were very fast, and KO also managed to use his dodges. Grinning, the boy said that wasn't bad at all and a bit tired. Lucas said the same. Someone was watching from afar, and our hero noticed that someone was observing him. It was someone watching from near a tree. We see that it was an old man, and curious, Lucas asked why that old man was paying attention to him. Dong-ai noticed an opening and charged with full force, but Lucas dodged and made the boy fall hard to the ground. Hey man, that's not fair. You ran away from the fight. Alright, let's fight again until we have a winner. The old man left laughing. That girl asked the man if he was going back to the library, and if he wanted her to accompany him. But he said it wasn't necessary. He had found that young man, Lucas, very fascinating, and moreover, he hadn't even shown his true power yet. He also said he would remember the boy's name, Lucas. Later, our protagonist said that finally classes were over. Professor Silvio had taught them massage techniques so they could recover their bodies, and even demonstrated how to perform these recovery massages. The boy smiled, saying that today's class had been very productive. His goal was to obtain materials from the forest by killing monsters to produce more elixirs. But first of all, he would trade his items for some points. He arrived at the place and saw that Academy's shopping center was quite large. A training dummy cost about 30 points. He realized that everything there was expensive and that he would basically have to hunt all night to buy those items. He couldn't keep relying on his little sister's points to buy food, so he would have to manage on his own. But today, he intended to buy something to mix into his bath to help restore his energy. The woman working there was sleeping, and he immediately dropped his bag containing his magical items. The woman looked at that bag and began to wake up. He said he wanted to make a trade and collect his points. He also said he wanted to buy that item to mix into the bathtub, and she said it cost 5 points. He swiped his card and the correct amount was debited. Looking at his uniform, she knew that this guy was part of the martial arts department and even wondered where he had gotten those points. People there were quite prejudiced guys. Then she handed back his card, thanking him for the purchase, and even asked if he was sure he wanted to buy that kind of thing, saying it would be better for him to spend his points wisely. But he kept saying that he thought it wasn't enough, that he would come back later to buy more. She realized he was giving a snarky answer and even got a little angry. She even imagined that he only had points to buy those bath items because he was a noble. Then he went to Lobinho's cave and prepared a medicinal bath. Those herbs he bought to mix into the bath had cost quite a lot of points. And he even commented that it would be a waste to throw everything in and just leave. The wolf appeared behind him with its fangs out, and after finishing the bath, he said his body felt rejuvenated. The wolf was still behind him watching all of it, and the boy noticed that Lobinho was getting closer. All he wanted was to drink that liquid, and the boy asked, why did the wolf drink everything? Then the wolf made a guilty face, but it wasn't a problem since he was going to throw the water away anyway, and the good thing was that he drank it and became stronger. All fired up, the wolf asked if his master had brought meat. It was already dawn, and our hero was returning to the dormitory with some materials. He went there early and bought a training dummy. The woman was surprised that he had so many points to spend, but ended up saying goodbye to him, wishing he'd have a good training session. The next day, during Silvio's class, he was angry because the students weren't taking training seriously, and the event was in just one day. Since they hadn't worked hard enough, they would have to train after class. He started listing each student's weaknesses, and Kaio thought he didn't have any. But the teacher turned to him and said that the boy's attacks were very weak, and he even tried to argue with him, but Silvio flicked his forehead. Then the teacher pointed out everyone else's weaknesses and, rubbing his head, said that he would have a lot of work training those slackers. Then he called Tristana, and she went to him and he paired Kaio to fight with her. The boy got all fired up. He told her to be careful because he wouldn't hold back. In a fighting stance, she told him to come at her with everything he had. The guy really went in with all his strength. However, she managed to dodge, and his attack ended up hitting the ground. He smirked, thinking the fight would be easy, but before he realized it, Tristana struck him in the stomach. Then she prepared a knee strike. He jumped back, trying to kick the girl. She blocked with her arms, and at that moment he realized he was about to take a kick to the face. And that's exactly what happened. He was hit dead. On the strike was so strong that he staggered, but then he planted his feet firmly to stay upright and told the girl not to underestimate him. But it didn't help. Guys, he took another direct hit and was sent flying. The teacher said that Kaio kept his guard too low and told all the other students to pay close attention to how Tristana fought. Then she went up to him to ask if he was okay. Hey everyone, pay attention. Tomorrow you'll each have to tame a magical beast. If you fail, it'll expel you from the martial arts department. Since that day was the last day of training, they would have to train until nightfall. Kaio was worried. Then Lucas went to him and told his friend that his defense was a mess. He had the habit of always going on the offensive and leaving his guard open, but he got embarrassed and said that actually, he was in love with Tristana. It was the first time such a beautiful girl had thrown him that far, so he was completely smitten, even thinking about the names of their future children. The next day, the moment of the event had arrived. They were already scared because the place was huge, and they even said that the magical beasts would devour them. Some mages said they didn't want to stay near the martial artists because they were disgusting. Silvio turned to those mages and told them to use their empty heads to focus on the event. Then he sat down. Lucas thought that Professor Silvio would never defend martial artist students. At that moment he felt a strange aura. It was his friend Kaio, all nervous because of the event. So our protagonist told him to imagine slapping Silvio in the face, and he pictured that, thinking it worked. He stopped feeling nervous. Meanwhile, Silvio was up front, listening to the whole conversation, but he didn't do anything. Our hero told them to focus on defense, so they could tame the creatures. A big screen appeared and began explaining the rules to all the students. In that tournament, whoever managed to tame 10 magical beasts would receive a perfect score. And of course, they had a time limit. Only 10 minutes. Julia was all excited as she watched those areas being opened for them to enter and take part in the event. She would be the first to participate, and when she entered through the barrier, she realized that the place inside was very large, as if it were a separate universe. As soon as she stepped in, she came face to face with several evil creatures. Those monsters rushed toward the little girl, and she instantly summoned her staff in a slightly crazy way. She charged forward, saying that she would defeat those magical beasts, and with just one lightning strike, she managed to defeat 2 of them. The man explained on the big screen that he would be monitoring the students inside that magical barrier through the smoke. Whenever a magical creature was defeated, the smoke would indicate that it had been tamed. The instructors outside were surprised. That was because she had tamed those 10 monsters in a very short time. Her teacher congratulated Julia because she had finished in just 3 minutes. All excited, she asked where the martial arts department area would be, because she wanted to watch her brother. The teacher said they would take a while. Since they were the weakest students, they would go last. So she took the chance to go out and buy a snack. Meanwhile, that girl was curious to see how Lucas Ryan would perform. 2 hours had already passed, and most of the mages managed to get only 1 point by defeating just 1 magical beast. They even commented that it was very difficult, and that probably the martial artists wouldn't be able to defeat any. Realizing that it was much harder than he expected, Kaio started to panic. However, our hero told him not to worry, because mages weren't that much stronger than martial artists at that moment. Someone clapped their hands. It was the teacher, telling his students not to underestimate themselves because they were strong and could pass the exam. When it came to physical endurance and close combat, they were not behind the mages. The students found it strange since Professor Silvio was actually trying to motivate them. Tristana appeared and said she had checked with the mages and saw that none of them had gotten hurt. They had spent all their mana trying to defeat the monsters, which meant it was really difficult but not impossible. Besides that, the monsters were trapped inside a magical barrier, so if you came across a monster that was much stronger than you just had to back away and face weaker ones. In other words, guys, it wasn't impossible. They just needed a strategy. Everyone started thanking the class representative, saying that she had given very important information, and that shameless Professor Greg showed up to mock the martial artists. He kept saying that those non-magic users were complete trash and didn't even deserve to be part of the event. Silvio asked what Greg wanted, and he said that he wished the martial arts department would disappear from the school. He even laughed, saying he really wanted to see those martial artists humiliated, and since the mages were already struggling to defeat the magical beasts, the martial artists would surely be humiliated. The guy wouldn't stop trying to insult them, and Silvio stayed quiet while that idiot kept laughing. Then he left, laughing, and Lucas watched all that, remembering the people who used to bully him in his previous life. He said that this professor resembled them. Then our hero stood up. Since he had ranked first in his class, he wanted to be the first to enter the exam. He asked the teacher if he could go first, and Silvio said yes. He even said that if Lucas was nervous, he could send Tristana instead. However, our hero's eyes began to glow, and he said no. He himself wanted to be the first, and he even said that he would definitely score high enough to make those idiots regret it. His friends started shouting words of encouragement. The teacher was surprised because, just moments earlier, they had been trembling with fear, and now their emotions had completely changed. They also said that Tristana would do well too. 10 minutes later, our hero was already inside that place. He had to move quickly because he only had 10 minutes. There were perception circles that allowed people to watch what he was doing inside, so he needed to act carefully so that no one would discover what he was planning. When a magical beast recognized a master, it started communicating with them, forming a bond, just like he had done with his wolf at that moment. Lobinho turned and asked why his master was calling for him. Our hero was asking to borrow his power, and in that way he ended up using Lobinho's strength. A beastly owl appeared, and our hero started chasing it to tame it, since it was a high-level monster. However, it ended up hitting its head on the barrier. The area was quite small, so he would have to fight it in that confined space. Before the owl could do anything, our hero appeared behind it. The goal of our protagonist was to leave most of the beasts there without much energy, and that's how he managed to neutralize it. The boy's intention wasn't to tame all 10 magical beasts so quickly, but rather to weaken them all first. He even borrowed its power and said it would be very useful to use that ability for mobility, but he remembered that he couldn't tame them too quickly, or people outside would notice. That's why the owl ended up waking up. The poor creature didn't understand anything. Guys, and Lucas said that he would go look for more beasts, and even said goodbye to the owl. A few minutes had already passed, and he hadn't tamed a single creature yet. Callo started getting nervous because quite a lot of time had gone by and nothing had happened, but Julia trusted her big brother that Professor Greg kept mocking, saying that their best student hadn't scored a single point, and of course the martial artists were getting nervous with all that provocation. However, Silvio stayed silent, just observing naturally. Julia got angry and told that professor that her brother was much stronger than he thought. My God, how can such a powerful girl be so blind about her brother? Say whatever you want, girl, but the results speak for themselves. At that moment, Lucas Ryan gained 1 point. His classmates got all excited, and taking advantage of the situation, Greg mocked them, saying they were celebrating even though the boy had managed to catch only 1 beast. However, the numbers started rising quickly, reaching 4. And finally, it hit 5 monsters captured. Of course, he started laughing nervously because he was about to be humiliated. And when the event ended, our hero had tamed 10 magical beasts. That meant he had achieved the maximum score. When the time was almost up, he took the opportunity to tame them one by one. And he even went back to the beginning to get the owl since its power would be useful, and the poor thing really thought it would get away unpunished. The teacher was shocked because the boy had managed to capture 10 magical beasts in less than 10 seconds, and that's how Lucas Ryan achieved a perfect score. Julia was all amazed, saying that her big brother never disappoints. Thus, the first member of the martial arts department achieved a perfect grade. Everyone went there to congratulate him, and of course, that nasty professor kept saying that he had cheated, he didn't know how to lose, and Silvio immediately called the guy useless, saying that he lacked the ability to recognize others' strength. Julia and our hero said nothing, they just watched. At that moment, one of the inspectors stepped in to stop the argument and even asked Greg if he was implying that the instructors had allowed someone to cheat. It would be very bad for him to create hostility with those examiners, so he said he had expressed himself poorly, and was only finding it strange that a martial artist had achieved a perfect score. Meanwhile, Kyo and Lucas mocked the professor, saying that he was too bad at recognizing other people's abilities, and even loudly said that he had nothing to hide and hadn't cheated. 10 minutes later, the owl woke up. The magical barrier that was holding them had disappeared, and they even thanked God that the powerful human had left, and since the protective barrier that had trapped them was gone, they all escaped. Someone picked up their staff to cast a spell and managed to capture the owl again. They even said that those magical beasts were very agitated, and that they would investigate to see if our hero had committed any fraud. After investigating thoroughly, They found nothing unusual and even assumed that the boy had only managed to score perfectly, because the weaker creatures were left for last. They analyzed again and saw that nothing was wrong. So Lucas had probably acted fairly. Then they announced to all the other competitors that the first martial participant had achieved a perfect score. Our boy looked to the side and saw Tristana talking with the professor. Then she entered the room to participate in the event. She didn't want to lose to Lucas since she was the class representative, and with that, she charged in with full force. She immediately went after a celestial wolf and ended up defeating it. The girl even said that she wanted to defeat as many beasts as possible in less time than our protagonist. And that's why she went so quickly at the wolf. However, that creature's fur provided a sort of defense, so she had to land several punches. But halfway through she stopped because she realized that the wolf was surrendering. It was strange for a level 3 creature to give up so easily. She didn't know if she had really become that strong or if the creatures were weaker. But she concluded that the martial arts department wasn't much weaker than the mages after all. Then she began to destroy several other monsters. She had already captured 3 magical beasts. And the people outside started cheering. Within moments she had already tamed 6 monsters, finally 7, 8, and 9. Until in the end she tamed all 10. Tristana achieved a perfect score in much less time than Lucas. Everyone there started celebrating. And our hero stayed quietly in the back without saying anything. After going outside, people said that the martial arts department was surprising everyone. But it was already expected that she'd be strong since she was the class representative. Then the other candidates also started performing well and defeated the monsters rather easily. That blonde guy also got a perfect score, guys, and it seemed much easier than usual. The green-haired guy also got a perfect score, and finally it was KO's turn. And as expected, he also got a perfect score by defeating the tiger. Poor magical creatures, guys. They had nothing to do with it. He got all cocky since he had managed to tame 10 monsters. The ranking was Julia in first place, then Anna Miranda, followed by Lucas, and then Tristana. That blonde guy even started crying with joy because they never imagined they could be that strong. Silvio was happy because his students were doing well. And as expected, he went to a corner to drink his wine. The inspectors had to conduct a detailed inspection to see if there was anything wrong. An old man said that the martial artist performance had been impressive this year. They even started trying to come up with excuses to explain why they had done so well. After much discussion, they guessed that the creatures were already weakened because they had fought the mages multiple times, and the old man said that starting next year, he would put the martial artists first so that wouldn't happen again. Greg came in furious, saying that they needed to immediately stop the martial artists from participating in that event. Silvio was in the back listening to all that nonsense and even asked the professor if he had a problem with it. And Greg replied with a sort of threat. Turning his head, Greg said that he didn't have a problem. He just thought it was unfair that martial artists were ahead of the mages. The old man said that this was part of the event and that they couldn't interfere. Besides, it wasn't the students' fault and they couldn't just discard their scores, so they would announce the results to everyone, leaving the professor furious. That was because his students had performed poorly, guys. And the man just watched as everyone left. Filled with hatred, he said he would take revenge on Professor Silvio. The 2 old men stayed there talking. They needed to do something about it since the mage's reputation was at stake. The director said he was already taking the necessary measures, but couldn't share all the details. The only thing he could guarantee was that there was nothing bad for their school. The scene shifted to the martial artists' dormitory. KO was all smug because they had achieved perfect scores. All of that was thanks to our hero, guys, who had exhausted those beasts. But of course, he wasn't going to tell anyone that. The only thing he said was that thanks to Silvio, they had gotten stronger. They entered the dormitory and closed the door, asking each other what they would spend their points on for finishing in first place. The chubby guy said he was going to buy lots of delicious food. And KO got mad, saying they should spend their points on training equipment. Lucas asked what kind of training equipment he wanted to buy, and he said that actually they wanted to enter the magic tower. It was a field that functioned as training and could only be accessed by those who passed the Magical Beasts event. Everything inside was made of illusions. That's why they could train without many risks. The blonde boy said that only 100 freshmen could enter each year, so the spots were very limited. Kadio agreed and said that was why the mages were upset about the martial artists ranking high, because now they could enter the magic tower. The boys stood up. Kadio asked where they were going, and the two said they were going to buy training materials, then ran off since they wanted to get stronger. After hearing that story, Lucas understood why the mages were so angry with them. Kadio asked Lucas to come with him to the materials shop, and of course our protagonist refused. Then he showed a rare item. He had received that item from Silvio for finishing first in class. Since it was a rare item, he wanted to research it a bit more. As Kadio was in love with Tristana, he said that she should have gotten first place. No, Lucas, well, whatever. I'm going to the materials shop to buy some items. And then the two said goodbye at the materials shop. They saw that the waiting list was long. That happened because the martial artists had earned many points and ended up buying the items the mages wanted. A girl got angry and kicked the wall. That was Lila, one of Greg's students, and she was extremely angry with those martial artists. She even said that all her effort was worthless because those useless people had stolen first place from her. At that moment, a mage threw a blade at the display screen and said that those trash had taken up 20 slots in the magic tower. That tower was meant for mages, not for martial artists, so they needed to find a way to eliminate those artists who were interfering with their studies. He pulled his blade back and said that, most likely, the martial artists had bribed the teachers to perform well in that test. Some other mages there asked if that was really possible. A guy with glasses said he had seen two lackeys, heirs of a rich family, talking to the instructors. That was Andre, another of Greg's students, and he said that, most likely, the martial artists had bribed them. Since they had stolen those 20 spots from the mages in the magic tower, they needed to do something about it. The girl said that those martial artists were very weak and didn't deserve that spot. And with an evil look, she said it would be better for them to correct those martial artists' growth rate, and so they went into the forest to hunt some martial artists. They ended up finding two of our protagonist's classmates, that same blonde boy and the green-haired one. And we saw that the guy was all beaten up. The green-haired one noticed that his friend had been poisoned. Wait a minute, do you guys want our points? We can give them to you, but that wasn't what they wanted. The boys ended up being hit by powerful spells, and besides being injured, they were poisoned so that they would die slowly. The girl told them to shut up, saying that she didn't want their points. The poor guy who had nothing to do with it was lying there groaning in pain. The girl said that her only demand was very simple. They were to return to the martial arts department, and once there, they were to say that the lives of those trash were worth less than insects. And with that they left, leaving the two wounded behind in the forest. Several hours passed, and our protagonist, together with Ko, began searching for their friends. It had been a while since they had disappeared, and Lucas was already imagining what might have happened. He had a bad feeling because the situation at the academy that day had been very strange. And when they reached the deeper part of the forest, they began to smell blood. When he sensed that smell, he immediately realized what it could be. So he ran in that direction. Ko asked what was happening, and when they arrived, they saw their friends injured. They were in critical condition, very close to death. Seeing that scene, Ko became furious and asked, "Who the hell did this?" Picking up the green-haired boy, he trembled all over and said that it was Greg's class that had attacked them. Besides poisoning them, they had cut all their meridians. Realizing that, Lucas became extremely enraged. He even screamed in anger. Since the guy was still alive, there was a chance he could survive. So Lucas started striking various vital points to prevent the poison from spreading further. Ko got angry and ran off to get help. In addition to all that, they had also broken every bone in their bodies punching the ground. Lucas said that those people were extremely evil. That bullying had crossed the line. It was basically an attempt at elimination. The wounded boy began calling out for his father and mother. Lucas realized he wouldn't make it, so he promised the boy that he would avenge him. Help arrived, and Tristana asked what had happened. Even shocked by that scene, after explaining everything, Lucas said that he wouldn't allow this to happen again. They had brought some first aid equipment, and Tristana said she would go to the student council the next morning to report everything that had happened. They said that probably no one would care, but she didn't mind. However, the girl was frightened by Lucas. That was because he had always been a calm and kind person, but now he was completely furious. He would settle that feud no matter what it took. So she went to the student council, and that redhead Teodoro listened to everything and even asked if they wanted to propose a duel with Professor Greg's class. Our hero said that was exactly what he wanted, and that he would demand they apologize. Pretending to be concerned, the man said there was no way to prove Greg's students had done it, and asked if Lucas wanted to offer only that rare tooth as a bonus for whoever won the duel. He even said that wouldn't be a good enough prize. The man threw the item on the floor, saying it had slipped from his hand, and added that they should propose something more appropriate as a reward for the duel. Nostroi got angry because he saw that in that world there was no justice. Ko stared at that item, and just as he was about to curse Teodoro, our hero stepped forward. "Tell me what you think would be more appropriate." Feigning thought, he said he was thinking of something more fitting as a bonus. It should be something that everyone wanted. Then he came up with something and said it would be the qualification for the magic tower. Whoever lost would no longer be allowed to enter. In other words, they would give the right to enter the magic tower entirely to Greg's students. That was a very high-stakes bet, and our hero accepted it. The duel was scheduled for 2 days later, which drew the attention of all the students. The wretched Professor Greg even praised his students for attacking those 2 martial artists. Meanwhile, Professor Silvio made no personal comment. He only intensified the combat training quietly. And so, the day of the duel arrived. All the students at the academy gathered to watch. And of course most of them were cheering for those vile mages. The girl said from afar that she would humiliate our hero, and he said nothing. Ko was completely fired up and said to start it already because he wanted to punch a mage's face. That shameless guy with glasses said he was going to humiliate Ko. And when the fight began, Ko immediately charged at that show-off. The mage raised his staff and fired several ice spells, however Ko charged straight into all those attacks. The mage asked if he had blocked all that ice, and that's exactly what happened. Ko blocked with his dagger and even taunted the mage, asking, "Is that all you've got for today?" And pointing his dagger, he said that he expected more from that mage. Of course the guy got all angry and laughing. Said that the martial artist had fallen into his trap. The boy realized that his feet wouldn't move. That was because they had been frozen. That wretched mage had cast a spell on the ground and said that now the boy couldn't escape anymore. "Say goodbye, pampered noble." Ko prepared himself for the attack, but it would be very difficult to escape unharmed since all the ice shards fell on him. Thus he started bleeding. And the mage asked if now that fool had understood. It was impossible for martial artists to defeat mages, and we saw that Ko was all wounded. He sighed, and as he got closer, the guy with glasses asked if Ko had surrendered. The mages said it was only natural for trash to remain trash. Lila asked Lucas if they now understood the distance between their levels. "How long are you going to keep saying that crap to me?" And returning to the arena, Ko ended up using a lava spell. The girl screamed, telling her classmate to be careful, and that way he ended up self-destructing, creating a massive explosion. The mage wondered how he had managed to use a spell. Then he remembered that the boy had probably tamed a beast that had lava powers. Ko appeared behind him and struck his chest with the blade. The man screamed in pain. The spectators couldn't believe that a martial artist had injured a mage, and everyone there was shocked, saying that he had even managed to burn his own legs, and that's exactly what happened. Ko's legs were completely burned. He even said that it was exactly as Lucas had told him. Mages would drop their guard when they felt confident. The guy with glasses said that this was a huge insult, and preparing a spell he said he wouldn't let that trash hurt him again. But Ko prepared another attack with that explosive lava and threw it at the boy again. He used the explosion as a boost to get closer to that guy. Screaming in fear, the mage started using spells to freeze Ko, but it didn't work because he was bloodthirsty. Desperate, the mage told the boy not to come near him, and in an unexpected move, Ko headbutt the guy. It was strong enough to knock him unconscious and even send the mage flying. That attack was brutal, leaving Ko passed out. And so the winner of the first round was Ko, a martial artist. He went up to our hero and commented that the strategy had worked. He didn't even suspect that he was stronger thanks to an elixir pill our hero had given him. Now the next match would be Tristana versus Lila. And that's how we finish our recap, guys. If you want to see this next battle, leave a comment below, martial artist. If there are lots of comments, it'll bring the continuation for you soon. Also remember to leave a hype because that helps YouTube recommend our video to more people. If you want me to bring the continuation of another video here on the channel, comment below which series it is. That way you'll know which ones you're enjoying so I can bring part 2. And he'll also leave 2 other series here from the channel that I'm sure you'll like. So we'll see you there. That's all for now. Thanks, and see you later, everyone.